No.
And is Jake attending today or no? Okay. All right. Welcome to the March 11th ARPA Rescue Plan Committee meeting. First thing we'll do is establish a quorum. And Scott Willis,
Here?
Misha? Yeah. And John Rogers?
Here.
He is available online today. And Troy? Not hearing from Troy. Okay, so Troy's not available. We have committee of 5, so we do have a quorum. We have submitted, Scott did, thank you very much, the February minutes. Does anyone have any comments on those minutes, and are they ready for approval? Anyone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from February 11th, 2022.
And I will second. And since we have one online, we'll do a roll call. And Scott?
Yes.
I'll say yes. Misha? John?
Yes.
All right, the minutes from February are approved. I'll make a few announcements here to start. We do have with us today Todd Clevenger. He is the grants administrator from the Hamilton County government, we should say, and they have been far advanced, if you will, in their processes and have already done their nonprofit distributions. So they've been through all of this, and one of our big topics today is reviewing the rubric for how we're going to objectively be going through applications we received. So he was so kind to offer his assistance today if we are so interested in picking his brain. So thank you very much for being here. And we also have Dustin with Burns and Thornburg, who is our legal counsel for this project, and thank you very much again for being here. So very briefly, the application is available. It's online. It is on a community news alert on our website, so you can download it there. I did specify when I put out the notice on it that you might want to wait until this rubric is done so you can know how your applications will be assessed. So I have had a few requests for meetings from nonprofits, I think, so they can better understand what they need to do, and we'll be going through that. So just for everyone's notice, it is available. So that is done. So a few things, and this was not necessarily a specific item on the agenda today, but I do want to bring it up because there's been questions. So there's still talk of the why, and a decision has not been made in terms of using ARPA funds to help construct the why. There was thought that there wouldn't be money available to other nonprofits if we did choose to do that, and that is not the case. And so I just wanted to let people know that this initial disbursement was $4.9 million. We are getting another $4.9 million, I believe, in May. And we have right now, at least in our plan, 40% to infrastructure, 45%, and this is only the first 4.9, into the economic loss category. I think that's probably the right way to say it. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Revenue
Yeah.
loss.
Revenue loss, which is how we've been characterizing our available help to nonprofits. So, coming up with some numbers here, because we never did say exactly how much we were going to make available to nonprofits, and whether you include the why in that is a separate matter, I think, because that's a construction-based project. There is this idea that we won't have anything. And I was discussing with Scott the other day what he thought was the appropriate total, because we had never discussed outside of that 45% how much would actually be total for nonprofits out of this distribution? And how do you factor the why into that? So, long story short, I did some rough numbers, and Scott, please interject. With our current distribution, it's 2.205 mil that is available to nonprofits in this distribution. We have not figured out how we're going to be using our next distribution. If we did go with the Y, the vast majority of that's coming from next year. That would be the case. And at the very least, there's going to be at least 500,000, in my estimation, that could safely accommodate the nonprofit requests outside of Y. Why we choose to do that.
I would agree with that. Based on the numbers Jeremy gave us for his project that he wants to get done, I think there's probably really good support from the council for that. If we do 500,000 and we do 5 million to the Y, we won't have enough to completely fund it, but we'll be really close. And I would think that with the conservative way we budget and estimate revenue, we would have the ability to do both. So I agree with that number of 500,000.
And Jeremy, in our plan, because 40% goes to infrastructure in our current plan, he does have available about 1.9 million or so to use on infrastructure, of which he has given us preliminary details in how he hopes to use that. And is primarily stormwater project for our downtown. We have an area that has basically no infrastructure for stormwater, which is not good for a downtown area. It doesn't currently have any funding identified to use from anywhere else. So it kind of meets a lot of different needs. And that's what Jeremy is wanting to use on that. He has gotten that approved through Board of Works. The initial amount, I think, is about 300,000 for design. Jeremy, are you on the phone?
Yeah, I'm on here, and that's correct. 300,000 project going and get through design. One nice part about this project specifically is if we cannot cover it completely with the ARPA dollars, it would be eligible for several of our other funding categories. So MBH, LRS, impact fees. So we can take some or all from any of those under other funding sources when we get to the construction phase if we need to close a gap. So it doesn't grossly impact any one revenue source. It can be divided amongst the different revenue sources. So it's so that we can fully fund the project even if ARPA doesn't completely cover it.
Okay. And so, I mean, there are funding options available for that last bit if ARPA doesn't cover it, but that's not identified right now. Just to be
correct. Until we fully know the total cost of construction, and then we understand what our cash balances are in the other funds as well as our projected revenues at that time, we'll develop the full funding plan based on what we get from ARPA in total, as well as whatever the cost of project is.
Okay.
And Jeremy, how long will that project take to get it off the ground and where we need to have the money to fund it?
Funding for construction, I would say it would be in fiscal year 2024. So it's about an 18-month design process.
Okay, great. That gives
Yeah,
us a lot
I would
of
agree with that,
flexibility.
Jeremy. That's correct. Yep.
Okay. Thank you, John.
Perfect.
And as long as we obligate by 2024, we're good, right?
That is correct.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
And
Now-
the other thing we can do too is, and I've talked to the Y about this at nauseum, they don't need 5 million committed now. We could say we're going to do 4 million up front, 500,000 next budget, and 500,000 the next budget. We can string this out. They just need the commitment. So it sounds like we got a lot of flexibility in how we budget and how we accomplish everything we want to accomplish.
Well, and just for our public to know, the broader discussion on the why and whether or not the city is going to make that pledge, which would actually come out of the general fund and be reimbursed by ARPA funds, just administratively, That's being handled by the full council and not this committee. So I didn't want anyone here thinking we're going to be discussing that and making a decision, because that is not the case. So,
Correct.
okay, well, let us move on to why we are here and what we need to finish to be able to get these applications done and in and reviewed. So Dustin provided us with this draft of review criteria. And we also have Todd, again here, who they have their own criteria, which I don't have a copy of here, that they used to do theirs. And I don't know if you've had a chance to review ours to see how closely it follows what the county used.
You're much more sophisticated than we were.
Okay.
So, did they receive other funding elsewhere? That was one of the main criteria, made sure they were in Hamilton County. Your scoring system is much more comprehensive than ours was.
Okay.
Do you recommend that, or is there a reason why you guys went maybe not quite so structured, or?
Probably because the person in charge of putting it together wasn't as sophisticated as Dustin is, so. So the committee, so I think we have a committee of, so the 3 commissioners and 3 council members. When they sat down for it, we didn't specifically focus on the scoring right away. And as we got halfway into it, they said, oh, we need to have a scoring system. So what we did is we went back and gauged it off of some of the other funding applications that we've done in the past, whether it was out of our general fund or whatnot, and we base it off that. So a lot of the criteria, we wanted to make sure we were consistent with what we did in the past, because as Dustin can attest to, Treasury looks at consistency over and over again. That's what they look for. So a big thing was, did they get any other funding from other sources? I mean, all of the committee members agreed to that one. Make sure they're in Hamilton County. There were 2 others that, did they get any unemployment? And I'll look up the next one, but so yeah, your scoring system is, you're gonna have a lot easier time going through it with this scoring system than we have with ours.
Okay, well, that is helpful to know.
Yeah.
I did get initial feedback from John especially, that he was wondering why there wasn't some different weightings, if you will, because he thought that certain things might need different kind of weighting. And John, do you want to clarify, was there anything specific in there?
Sorry, not necessarily specifically, but, normally when you have a process like this, when we're doing something like this for an RFP, we will weight, certain things. So is the demonstration of the need, 50% of our criteria versus in this case, it's 33%, 33%, 33%, right? So in most cases, you have 1 or 2 drivers that you're measuring that are way more towards the final decision. In this case, everything's equal. And maybe that's what we want. I just wanted to be sure.
Okay, I think I see what you're saying. I know for me, this question of, is the service to the underrepresented or disadvantaged? And I know that most nonprofits are probably going to fall into that category. But for me, these funds were really meant to help in that regard, and I want to make sure that that's where they're going. And I don't mean to say that one nonprofit is not serving, certain communities when they are, but if they're not serving primarily those that are disadvantaged or underrepresented, I think that doesn't really meet the intent of the ARPA, to me. And so that's important, and that is in here. So, does it need different weighting, in my opinion? Not necessarily, because I'm happy that it's there in the form that it is. I just want to make sure that when we actually review these, that comes out somewhere, I guess. It's hard to say without having these in yet how that's going to play out, so.
Let me give you another example. So Cindy, what you just said, let's say you want that, you've expressed you want that to be a driver, okay? So maybe that's 50% of the decision. The demonstration of need or expenditure evaluation, expenditure evaluation is 30% and the financial statement's 20%. Right, so now you've prioritized. You've said that you just said this, the most important part is they're servicing this community of need. So it has a heavier weight, depending on how you score over here on the right, you're still going to, that score is going to carry more of a punch, if you will, when you're evaluating strictly based on scores. So you still get to be driven by the final score, but you've weighted it accordingly to your number one objective.
Well, and that's just mine. I don't want to.
Understood,
overtake
understood,
everything.
but
If anyone has
that's one of the
thoughts on-
reasons, yeah, that's one of the reasons you put that process in place.
Justin.
I just wanted to make one clarification about the way that I structured the eligibility criteria. So there's the two different pages
Correct.
reflect your initial application and then the supplemental application. So and certainly we could change that, but if you were going to try to weight them, it's not 6 factors, it's 2 groups of 3.
Right.
So you would be pivoting those point values in each of those groups. But we could certainly also restructure to one review criteria, or we could do different things. But as the way I set it up was as two sets of evaluations rather than one big 6-factor evaluation.
Yeah, and I think that's helpful for folks to know if and when they do see this, that you're not going to be doing all 6 of these at once. Your first submittal, whether we decide that you're going to go further or not, is going to be the first review with this first rubric, which is basically 3 questions. And then the next one has the next 3. So if you're asked to submit further, then you'll have these next 3. I hope that makes sense. And of course, I know that I have people in the audience looking at me like, is she nuts? And I apologize, this is not handy online, it will be soon. I didn't want to put the draft out there without us having any conversation about it, so.
I'm happy to explain kind of what the 2 sets.
Please do,
So
yes, if you want to go through those.
The first eligibility criteria, the 3 factors that I had listed in the draft were demonstration of need, expenditure evaluation, and financial statements. And the initial application, just in response to the committee's discussion on it, is really about ensuring that a nonprofit has demonstrated economic impact as a result of the public health emergency, which would make them eligible to receive a nonprofit grant under the terms of the final rule. And then the supplemental application, it's the review criteria for it. The 3 factors are service to Westfield, Washington Township, service to underrepresented or disadvantaged communities, and the budget document. And so the supplemental evaluation is really for organizations the committee has sort of designated as eligible and appropriate to provide grant funding to. And then the supplemental that second evaluation is really about, I think, kind of weighting the amounts of funding that's going to go out based on impact in the community and for the communities that the monies are intended to assist with. So there's kind of a financial evaluation, and then there's a more mission-oriented valuation, if you will.
And then the scoring is like 0, so say for your budget document, and this is on the second part, a 0 would be missing or incomplete submission, 1 would be complete submission, but budget items are not in line with guidance. 3 is a complete submission that demonstrates funding will be used to support operations or COVID responses. 5 would be complete submission that demonstrates funding will be used in a manner that enhances the applicant's ability to serve the community, in addition to providing support for operations or COVID response. So it's structured in that regard where it's 0, 1, 3, 5. And then, so each, the first one that you would submit for the criteria is a total of 15 points. And then the second one is also 15 points. And how you score in that and where you land is how that's going to play out. We're really wanting to make this objective and not play favorites. I mean, this really needs to boil down to an objective kind of process, so.
And I would add, I don't know, have we had conversations about who's going to chair the evaluation of these applications? Because I would argue, and I think the county did it as well, that we as an ARPA committee should not be the ones that are doing this. I think there's people in our community who are probably more qualified to look at the need, to look at the ask, and see if those align and fit our criteria. So I would like to see us find other people in the community outside of the political arm of most of us here on this platform, and get somebody in the community to be a part of that. Todd, you did that, did you not, in the county as well?
No.
Okay, I
Actually,
thought you
the
guys
committee
did.
all of the,
It was Noblesville that did.
Yeah.
It was Noblesville that did.
yeah.
Thank you.
We took, obviously, we took feedback from the committee, from the community, but it was the committee that evaluated it all.
Okay.
The one piece to be careful about there is that the final rule has really clear reminders about your community's conflict of interest policy, and so those people will just have to be chosen very carefully, because once you bring people into the circle of decision makers around the ARPA funds, it's really important that the conflict of interest policy is followed related to decisions on the funds. So
Absolutely.
but I think I think you can do that.
Were you familiar at all with why Noblesville did it that way?
I'm not their plucky kid who comes up for their meetings. So, but I could try to find out who their plucky kid is who comes up for their meetings and ask. I don't know.
We can do that. I knew, I thought it was the county, but I knew somebody over in Noblesville was doing it on a separate committee, because they had mentioned that they wanted to get the political piece out of the process.
It kind of be, I like the idea, but I think it'd kind of be tricky because, again, finding the right people, already, I mean, just by us approving those people is already introducing that bias, I guess. And I don't know how we go through that vetting and find all these people, and again, in an expedited manner, because we want to get moving with this. I mean, I do like that idea.
I know I'm conflicted. I think Troy's conflicted as well. There's a few of us that were going to be conflicted. So I just think there's probably ways to eliminate that altogether. Just a thought. I certainly don't want to slow this process down. But I know people in the community who are on the fringes of non-for-profits that aren't going to be here looking for money, that really understand their world, and I think would be probably better qualified to make. I mean, we've laid out the criteria, and I think we've done it in a very methodical way that the numbers are going to tell you whether you're qualified or not. I think we can trust to get that out to maybe people who are a bit more familiar with that process.
Some of this, though, I think you really have to be understanding of the goals of ARPA, even though it's all very much laid out. I don't
Maybe
know if
one-
everyone would be in a position to understand
Maybe
who the
set one
underrepresented
person-
people in the community are, or, you know, these different things.
Maybe one person from our committee serves on it. Maybe that's another option. Or we attach Dustin to the committee to make sure they're being advised on the legal ramifications of that.
I'm happy to explain the final rule guidance to whoever you need me to explain it to.
Perfect. I don't think it's something that's difficult to understand.
I probably shouldn't be I'm not going to be on the committee.
I mean, as
for-
advi-
for
no,
a
you're not
range
making
of
decisions.
legal ethics reasons. But if you need me to explain the rules, I can.
Not that we don't trust you, but that's not, yeah, I totally agree.
Misha, John, do you, either one of you have an opinion on this?
Cindy, I I think that, I like the idea of having more community input, and, you know, and I would volunteer to be on that scoring, because I have the least amount of, of direct conflict, if you will. But I do think there are folks that are on the front lines that are going to have insight that we just won't have.
But that also wouldn't be connected to any of the nonprofits that would
Yeah,
be.
I mean, yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, but they're still in the front, they're volunteers. They volunteer for a couple of these organizations, or maybe more than a couple of the organizations. Or volunteer in other communities. But they're on the front line, so they would be able to provide some real insight that we just don't have.
And the real reasoning to do this is because there's either conflict or even perceived bias,
Correct.
that would be the reason. To do it
Correct, yeah.
that way.
I just think, I mean, 3 of us are on this committee, are elected officials. I don't want to politicize this thing. I just don't want to. And I just think that it makes more sense to have people in our community. You know, a great example, looking out in this room right now, we have our township trustee, who is very familiar with non-for-profits. She's, quite frankly, responsible for poor relief in our community. I don't believe you're coming asking for any money. I don't believe you're allowed to through this program. Maybe you are, maybe you aren't. Exactly. So there's one person right away that understands ARPA, is non-biased, is somebody stepped away from this committee, and I just think it makes more sense to try to go that route.
Okay, my opinion, I'm talking about myself. I am disqualified for approve somebody, because everybody in here, everybody needs something, and to me, they're all qualified, to my opinion. So until, somebody outside the committee, to me, to bias, more to bias, they can qualify, that they can exactly see what they need. To me, I like to give all of them, because that is not fair too, so. They are
Okay, Misha's
here-
off the committee.
They are here because they need us, everybody needs us, so it's a very hard.
Well said, well said.
You know, it's funny, I'm eyeing you, Todd, because I'm like, you are a grant administrator, and then I'm like eyeing you going, you're not in Westfield. You've been through this. Would you be biased? And could we put you on a committee like that or something? Just questions I'm asking.
That's above my pay grade. I didn't go to law school, so you'd have to ask someone smarter than me. But this was the area that our committee struggled with, because Misha's right. Everybody needs it. The other criteria that we looked at was the impact on the community. So when they were talking and what they put in their application, so that was the other one. What our committee members did, because they thought they had a better understanding of what was in the application, what they were asking for, what it was going to be spent on, as opposed to the outside people. Each of them scored all the applications, they prioritized them, and then they put in there what they thought of the ask, what was a good percentage. We put all that together, averaged it out, and that's how they ranked. So we tried to take, because everybody has their favorites, everybody. But by putting them together, you kind of take that bias out of it, and then we came up with an average, and then we ranked them by how all the committee members voted. So, but there were some sleepless nights over this. And we were a little more strict. Right here you have missing information on the application. We threw them out.
Mm-hmm.
They were disqualified. If they didn't have a complete application, they didn't make it to the next round. So you guys have a lot more to think about.
I think that might be a function, though, too, of our two-step process, because I think some of them, when they don't qualify in that first, they don't move to the second one. So I think some of that is cleared out there, not all, but potentially a lot of it, so. I'm intrigued, I see the value. Choosing the people, getting that done quickly, them agreeing to do it.
I could have 3 names to you by the end of the day, without a doubt. I got
Well, I
names
don't know
flying
that
through my
it's
head right now.
proper for you, actually, to put those.
No, I'm
names
just
up.
saying I've got names, and I think it would be very easy for us to come up with this group. I don't want to pick it. I'm just saying I've got lots of names in my head. I could start rattling them off right now. People who are not conflicted, who are engaged in this community, who know the needs of the non-for-profits.
Procedurally, are we restricted in how we would go about doing something like that? I mean, obviously, we have to do everything open and in the public. Does that, if we were, say, to choose these people, that wouldn't be behind closed doors, that would have to be public, right?
I would think if the committee was taking an official action, yes, you would need to do it in a public meeting.
And obviously, we wouldn't have names today, I mean, to be able to do that and to identify people today.
From a practical standpoint, you could put out the review criteria, and collect applications and then appoint a committee to review, or appoint, this body to review the applications. What I'm saying is maybe don't have to stop the whole process.
Right,
That'd be great, yeah, because I don't want to slow anything down.
but we would have to wait to our next meeting to actually do appointments to a review committee.
Yes, yeah, I would think so.
But we could be collecting applications at that same time, so it doesn't really stop us from doing anything.
Yeah.
Or we could even call another meeting just to appoint us if we have to. I mean, I don't see a reason why it has to slow anything down.
I'm torn here because I didn't think about this prior. Originally, this was structured for our committee of 5 to do this review. But you're right, we have a majority that have potential
Yeah.
sizable conflicts, so.
Yep. Yep,
We could always schedule another meeting fairly soon to do that.
to appoint it.
And again, I haven't received any applications yet.
I
mean,
think we got time, I
We
agree.
do have now, and it says on the application, there is one email, it's ARPA committee at westfield.in.gov, and that goes to all 5 of us on the committee. You will not see a reply all or anything like that because we don't want to be violating open door law, but for us to receive those applications, that's where it was sent to have it go to one address, just so people are aware.
And the government historically is a cumbersome beast to
Yes.
move. So I would argue, let's not be that cumbersome beast. If we have to meet, we got to notice it, proper notice it. If we want to meet next week, let's notice it and meet. I mean, we're talking one simple thing we would need to do, and that is to nominate this committee. I think the sooner we do it, the better, if we go down that route, because it gives them a chance to get their legs underneath them before they're faced with all these applications. So I would argue, let's create a forum to get people to volunteer or for us to go out and select it. And once we have a good slate, we meet, we notice it, we meet, and we vote, and we move on.
Sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah. Sooner a disbursement money is better for a clerk treasurer office too. I'm a part of a clerk treasurer office, just make sure balance. You don't overspend or don't give too much, or that's here. So better process is better for us too. Close the books easier for us.
Right.
So.
Well, I
Hey,
don't-
Dustin, what are you spoke earlier of some criteria so that there is a little bit of structure in this process. What is that? Do you have that specific?
Do you mean under the final rule?
Yeah, well, we're looking at, when Scott first mentioned this about reaching out into the community, You mentioned that, there's some certain aspects that they're going to, those people, those be abiding by or would be subject to. Could you elaborate?
Well, so the final rule, so the space under the American Rescue Plan Act in which this program exists is the category on responding to the negative economic impacts of COVID-19 and the public health impacts as well. And so ultimately, any program that the city would undertake in that space has to be guided by the question of what is the negative economic or public health impact of the public health emergency that you're responding to, and is the response proportional to that impact? And so the application was structured to solicit the kind of information that would allow the committee or whatever body is going to decide on the applications that the nonprofit organizations who would be receiving grants were impacted or suffered a negative economic impact of COVID-19 or had some COVID-19 related mitigation measure that they wanted to undertake using grant funds, which is the universe of things with that you can provide grants to nonprofits for. And so the eligibility criteria, the first of the two criteria tries to evaluate, I think, to drive to that issue of did you show negative economic impact? And I think that is what, while the application and the eligibility criteria would be helpful, that may be the piece that needs explained to the committee is that, and I say that it would need to be explained because in working with a lot of people with the final rule and trying to implement these programs, there's a really common misunderstanding that ultimately these grants are about what you're going to do with it, and they're not. And really, under the final rule, they shouldn't be about what the nonprofit is going to do with the money. What you should be supporting is the nonprofit's operational costs, right? Making sure that they can keep the lights on. And the decision is really is in terms of eligibility is about that we're responding to a negative economic impact on these organizations. And so while certainly your decision and the review criteria reflects this, can be colored by that the nonprofit serves your community, and certainly ARPA has in the background to all of the programming that it permits service to underserved and underrepresented populations who have been more often than not more harshly impacted by the pandemic than others. The thrust of what makes the program eligible is that it's responding to negative economic impact on the nonprofits, and so the decision makers may just need some guidance on that. That is the key and most important evaluation criteria. And under the criteria draft that was put together, the whole first piece is meant to kind of weed out organizations that don't meet that primary criteria before there's this sort of second level consideration about trying to pick organizations that where you're providing a grant for their operational needs, but that grant may be going to organizations that are serving populations that are sort of that ARPA is trying to serve and that serves Westfield, and that maybe is doing it in a way that is innovative and is going to maximize the impact of those operational dollars. I have talked a lot. Was that helpful at all?
Yes, it very much was. So given that, then what additional criteria do we have to meet? Would a volunteer who wants to be scoring these applications that we're going to put together, that group, or this small group? So Scott mentioned Danielle. What criteria does Danielle need to meet? Or are there any criteria that she needs to meet to be able to score these applications?
I think from the final rules perspective, from the final rule perspective, the only big major criteria is that the city, as a part of the award terms and conditions, has to have a conflict of interest policy that complies with 2 CFR Part 200.318, which is the general federal requirement for federal award dollars. And the thrust of that is that the decision makers, whether that's an employee or an officer or an agent of who the recipient of federal funds, you just can't get into a situation where and the employee, officer, or agent, or any member of their immediate family or their partner or an organization which employs them, is about to employ them, or has a financial interest or would receive a tangible person. There's a lot of pieces in this list. Your classic, the decision makers cannot be receiving any benefit as a result of the federal award. So here, I think really the thrust would be you wouldn't want anybody on the committee who works for, is married to anybody who works for, is in the family of anybody who works for, is gonna work for any of the nonprofits who have applied for the program. But that would be
Thank
sort
you.
of who's disqualified.
Thank you. So that would be one of the things, Cindy, that we would want to make sure people that wanted to volunteer would understand.
It's going to be really tricky because almost every person who's engaged in this community, I think, is at least a donor to a lot of these organizations, and I don't know
I don't
if
think a
that-
donor makes you're not going to financially
Well, would-
benefit from that.
No, but
I would-
it's on that fringe.
So I think that the term the regulation is using would be a financial or other interest or a tangible personal benefit, which I think, and this is, I'm gonna have to dig deeper into the meaning of all of these words, but my gut would be that a board member, right, is probably getting, or an employee is getting a tangible benefit of some kind, or has an interest. But just someone who is donated to that organization is not related enough to trigger a conflict. And certainly, you could disclose that. You could have folks disclose that, and what is important. And of course, the city's policy, because the city works with federal grants all the time, is in compliance with this policy and has mechanisms for managing conflicts. And so implementing that policy is going to be just the key here. But I can dig into the question of whether or not a donor triggers the kind of conflict that the federal regulation does not allow. And I will come back with a more concrete answer to Cindy about that.
So how about I make a motion to seek out nominations to serve on this committee. And while we are gathering those names, Dustin, you vet the whole, because I mean, quite frankly, I've given probably almost every non-for-profit in Westfield, so I would be completely, if that is the criteria, I'm out. And probably Cindy, you're out, and Troy's out, and now we're down to nobody's. We're down to Mika and John. So I think we're going to have to go through that anyways. And I don't know, Mika, you may be out too, and John may be out, and I mean, yeah, that's easy. Just Mika wants to give out, this is the Oprah Winfrey show. Cars for everyone. So I think maybe we got some work to do. So if the committee is on board with this, I'd like to go ahead and make the motion that we explore a committee to evaluate these applications, and that we put the wheels in motion to do that. And while we're doing that, Dustin will explore the criteria of being conflicted out. Is that a motion? Everybody's looking at me. Is that appropriate, Dustin? If not, clean that up for me, please, so we can move on from this.
I mean, insofar as it's just a statement of intent. I don't.
Well, we have to agree that we're gonna do that, so I guess maybe my motion is that we create a committee to vet the applications.
I think you can do that.
Is that a motion? That's my motion then.
That's your motion.
Perfect.
I will second that motion.
Let me catch up on my notes.
Okay, so, John?
Yes, yes.
Misha? Yes. Scott?
Yes.
And I am a yes. All right, so we have done that, and that moves us at least to that. We did not finish and make certain that we like this final rubric. And I really want to get that done so it's finalized. I'm happy with the way this is structured right now. Looking through it again and again, which I've done, and I know I've had a few comments. I know John had a few comments. John, did you want to see anything changed for sure in terms of the weighting or anything?
Again, the only suggestion I have is that maybe as a group, if we all feel pretty strongly about, as you described it, its impact on those communities that were impacted, then we should probably look at weighting that. But if that's not a priority, then this serves its purpose.
I think there's an easy way to do this where instead of changing the whole weighting thing, giving that instead of a total of 5 points in that category to make an available either 7 or 10 and adjust the points within there. How do you feel about doing it like that, John?
Sure, that's fine. Or you could just, have a multiplier column that for each of these. But either way will work. Either way, Cindy, will work. Dustin's familiar with doing it both ways probably, so.
I think I like just going with like a 0, 3, 5, 7 instead of the 0, 1, 3, 5. And that way it gives just a little bit more there.
That'll work.
How do you feel about that, Scott?
No, I'm with you on that, yep.
Misha? You'd be okay with that? And so changing that service to underrepresented or disadvantaged communities, instead of the scoring being 0, 1, 3, 5, it'd be 0, and then 3, 5, 7?
Mhm.
Okay. Do we need a motion on that or anything, or?
I think the document you were working with was just a draft anyway.
Okay.
It's not like you're changing something you had previously approved, so.
Okay, is there any other comments about this before we move to make it final? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve it as amended in this draft with
So
the?
moved.
Okay. We have a motion, do we have a second? Okay, so we have a motion by Scott, a second by Misha. John?
Yes.
And Scott?
Yes.
And Misha is a yes, and I am a yes. Okay, so we have that finalized. I will work with, is Chris Refkin still here? I think he is. I'll work with Chris to get this up on the website to go along with the application, so it's available. Yep. Okay, thank you. And that's done. We did have this discussion about the total funds to be made available with this project. And right now, I feel that 500,000 is an appropriate number to be made available, whether or not that actually all gets spent or whether it needs revision is something that can be discussed because our plan is fluid. But right now, I don't know. Todd, you're looking at me like you might have a comment about that.
It'll get
I figured it would. But I just wanted to put that out there. Again, I don't know that we need to do anything specific about that because we've already approved up to 45% to be used. Do you know, Dustin, if that would be a requirement to actually have a total to put on this?
I mean, I think that if your plan, which covered the nonprofit grant program, already exceeded that amount, so you wouldn't necessarily need to amend the ARPA plan straight away. I know that there's maybe plans to update the draft, or to have the city council consider an updated ARPA plan, and it would be fine to make that amendment as well in there if you wanted to carve this program out of that larger allocation, and, you know.
Right. But we wouldn't necessarily need to take another vote here because it's already been approved.
No, yeah, the plan was big enough to cover this already.
But we are going to need to amend that plan for a variety of reasons. And one is that whole taking the standard revenue loss and updating the plan to reflect that.
Yeah, the final rule has changed things since the original plan was adopted, yeah.
And that's what we're working off right now. In our plan was the interim guidance. We have not updated the plan to reflect the final.
Yes, there will be some new intro language in it, and yeah.
And that makes sense. Once we vote on the why, then we can, based on how that vote goes, we'll dictate, do we go back and revisit the plan, which we'll have to do.
Yes.
That's
If
what
it's
I've been
approved.
thinking with
Yeah, I
why
think that
we
makes
should
a lot
wait
of
until
sense.
that piece is decided
Yep.
so we can move forward.
So one question I had from the audience, do we have a deadline for these applications? Have we established that?
We
And
have
should
not.
we establish that at this point? Todd's shaking his head yes pretty emphatically, so.
I certainly didn't want to do that before because obviously we didn't even have our rubric out yet. And so
Yeah.
putting a deadline on there seems silly. But at this point, I guess we could consider doing that.
We want to give everybody time, but the
Yeah.
longer we give them, the slower we'll be getting it out, so. Ladies, gentlemen, anybody have any? 90 days, 120 days, 60 days, 30 days? I'm seeing shake your heads. 60, 30? Todd, 30? 30, okay.
Ooh, that does not seem like much time.
All these people out there work under much tighter deadlines than that.
Well, no, but the time, I mean, well, I guess just to apply for the deadline and given that, how does that work with our two-phased application system?
Well, that's just for them to get into
That's
phase
for
one.
just for the initial?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So do we want to make that like April 15th, just so everyone remembers tax day?
April 30th? 30 days, okay, so let's say April 15th.
That gives a little bit longer than the 30 days, so.
Yeah, it gets us through the weekend and then 30
Okay.
days, yeah, let's just do that. Man, we're getting things done today.
I will put that,
Exciting.
I'll work with informatics to get that deadline up on our website too, so it will be reflected.
I think April, Justin, do we have to have a deadline for federal?
April 30th, yeah, we're going to have some meetings to figure out a reporting.
Yeah, that is your first federal reporting date, yeah.
Will-
April 30th of '22.
Will you help us?
Yes.
Help us,
We have not
Obi-Wan
had to submit a
Kenobi.
report yet.
Your only hope.
What we understand of the federal reporting piece is that every program will fit into a numerically identified category, and so we will have identified those going into the reporting, and then the federal government will have specific questions about programs based upon what categories you're in. There is streamlined compliance and reporting for revenue loss, so the portion, and of course, we sort of won't be able to report on what is not allocated to a program. So it may be that on this annual report, the only program that has the kind of shape for reporting purposes is the nonprofit grant program, and we will answer the questions that Treasury asks about nonprofit grant programs, which in part may be simple because the program completion may be close to zero. So in terms of reporting expenditures, there may not yet be expenditures, so.
Okay. We do need to establish the future meeting dates, and we were doing just the once a month. Obviously, we're gonna need to have a sooner one to do this committee, subcommittee, if you will, review committee. So we will need to have a quorum there, obviously, like we do with every meeting. So can people check their calendars? I know we will need time to post our meeting. What
Wanna
is
do the-
that deadline?
Is it 48 hours
Oh, it's just 48?
in advance?
I don't know why-
Is the open door law requirement.
Oh,
You want to do the 25th? It's 2 weeks.
I
It's a
can do-
Friday,
I
2
can do
o'clock?
the 25th. Misha, can you do the 25th?
John?
Yes.
We don't have Troy here, so 3:25 will be that meeting, and we'll be considering nominations for this review committee. We also need to establish other general meetings. So we are going to be dealing with spring break. I should know when school's spring break is, and I don't. First week of April, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's in April.
First week.
Oh, we got school guys back there.
That would put us, and a lot of people are gone the first, correct?
The first is the first day of spring break,
Oh, okay.
actually.
So we're looking at going all the way to the 15th. Is that okay for you, Misha? John?
Yes.
Okay.
Because really, once we get that committee in place, then our meetings will, or it's okay if we push our next meeting out a while.
Well, and I think one of the goals at the next meeting is going to be updating that plan to send to council, so.
Yeah, we'll have a couple things to do, correct.
Yeah.
Because by then, we will have had a vote the day before. No, that's not true. A few days prior, we'll have voted on the why, and then the picture will be clear. So, if it approves, then we can start wrapping things up. If it's not approved, then obviously we've got more things to consider, so.
This is true. Do we want to schedule a May meeting, or do we want to, or do we maybe need a second one before that report is due?
I'd say since Troy isn't here, let's not push too far out.
Okay. So that separate committee review one is 3:25, and then the next general meeting, 4:15. And those will all be at 2 o'clock in here. And I'll make sure they're noticed, or at least work with those who are responsible for ensuring that they're noticed. Is there anything else? No.
Good meeting.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved?
We have a motion? Second?
Second.
And John?
Yes.
Misha? Yes. Scott?
Yes.
Me? Yes. We are adjourned. And thank you again, Todd, for being here, and Dustin as well.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. Appreciate it.